Right. Good morning, members. I'm make at 9:30 now, so we'll proceed with the planning meeting that we're here for this morning. So my name is Councillor June Clark, and I'm chair of the Central and East Planning Committee for Durham County Council. I have other people with us this morning to help to operate this meeting and to go through the business on the agenda. And before we start that, there are one or two things that I'm sure quite a few of us are familiar with now, but for those who aren't, I'll need to share this with you. This plan has been broadcast live on YouTube and will remain there for quite some months, I've been given to believe. So with that in mind, I just would like to remind people to be mindful and to be polite to each other, to follow, you know, the professional etiquette and courtesy we'd expect of our councillors. The other thing I would like to ask councillors is to remain on mute unless you wish to speak, and you realise that there's a time and a place for the councillors to speak as there is for the speakers. So if we can all remain on mute, when you do wish to speak, depending on what piece of technology you've got, there's either on the top cursor bar, or you could type in RT, which means right to speak. And we do have a committee services member here, Michael Turnbull, who reminded me that you've indicated you'd like to speak, just in case I miss it coming up on the chat line on the side. So thank you for that. We do have several guests who are joining us this morning, and they're already with us, and they'll be watching the whole of the committee until it's time for them to speak. So thank you very much for that, members. And now I'll move over to the agenda. And the items on the agenda today, number one, are apologies for absence. So, Martin, is it yourself who will be giving us information?
I'll give you them, Chair. So we have apologies from Councillors Cochrane, Hawley, Lang and Robinson. Thank you for that, Martin. And do we have any substitute members of those members? Chair, we have Jan Blakey, substituting for Councillor Ivan Cochrane. We have Councillor Lynn Pounder, substituting for Councillor Audrey Lay. And we have Councillor Ivan Jewell, substituting for Councillor John Robinson. Thank you for that information, Martin. Now, so item 3 on the agenda, the minutes of the meeting, which was held on the 8th of December 2020. And those are contained on pages 3 to 20 in the meeting pack. Now, as is normal, I'm assuming that members of the committee who were present at that meeting will have looked through those. Does anybody have any amendments, something that they'd like to flag about the form of those meeting minutes?
Move the minutes, Chairman.
Right, thank you, Councillor Shuttleworth. So we can move those minutes. Have we got a seconder for that?
I'd second that, Councillor.
Okay, thank you, Martin, if you've been able to record that. So that's the main minutes dealt with for last month. So item 4, and this is very important. We normally ask this at the beginning of the agenda. You only have one item on the agenda. However, if there's somebody who would like to declare an interest, you can always have the opportunity to declare that at any time. So declarations of interest from any members on the committee, and I think that's Councillor Freeman who's indicated.
Yes, as usual, committee, I declare that I'm a member of City of Durham Parish who I believe objected to the application on the agenda of their planning committee and have had no input into their response to this application. Thanks.
Thank you for that, Councillor Freeman. So before we go over to the actual application that we have to consider this morning, I'm going to do some introductions, as I would do if we were in the committee chamber, which I'm sure members are all familiar with now. And so in my mind, I'm going to be looking to my right. So if we can go from the right, so that would be you, Martin.
Thanks, Chair. Martin Tyndall, Committee Services Officer.
And Martin, you'll be timing the speakers and you'll be taking the minutes this morning.
That's correct, Chair. Thank you.
Okay. So next to me, I would have one of our legal representatives in this.
During plan process, the council proposed to delete the application site from the Green Belt. Secondly, that the council has previously agreed that this makes a limited contribution to Green Belt purposes. And thirdly, that the proposed development might fall within one of the exceptions in paragraph 145 of the NPPF, and therefore the applicant might not have to demonstrate very special circumstances in order for the application to be approved. Just in terms of the first point, that the council proposed the deletion of Fernhill from the Greenbelt through the County Durham plan process, this assertion isn't denied. However, when proposed to delete the application site from the Greenbelt was considered by the independent planning inspector as part of the examination public of the County Durham plan, the council and the applicant's arguments in support of the proposal to remove the site from the Greenbelt were rejected. In fact, the inspector went so far as to indicate that the draft County Durham plan would be unsound without a modification to delete the policy which proposed the Fernhill Greenbelt deletion. Following the adoption of the County Durham plan, the council now has an up-to-date adopted local plan in which the Fernhill site remains within the Greenbelt. Our position and my advice to committee in respect of the assertions by the applicant's legal advisor is we do not consider that arguments were put forward in a completely separate process and which were subsequently dismissed by an independent planning inspector can or should be relevant to the determination of the current planning application. In terms of the second issue, that the council has previously acknowledged the site makes a limited contribution to the Greenbelt purposes, I don't think anything actually turns on this point. I do not consider that there is a need to go through the Greenbelt purposes in order to identify the magnitude of harm. The officer report is clear that there is no harm identified at the Greenbelt, other than that which is deemed to arise due to the inherent inappropriateness of the development and the impact on the AHLV. In terms of the third main point, I do not agree with the applicant's assertion that the development might not amount to inappropriate development because it falls within one of the exceptions set out in paragraph 145 of the NPPF. This exception sets out that development on land which has been previously developed and which would not have a greater impact on the openness of the Greenbelt than the existing development should not be considered to be inappropriate. Clearly, in this instance, there would be a greater impact on the openness of the Greenbelt as there will be buildings constructed on what is currently undeveloped land or largely undeveloped land. So for these reasons, the officer's position in respect of the application remains as set out in the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Claire. I'm sure members found that useful. So now members will go over to item 5A on the agenda this morning, and this is in connection with Fernhill, Newcastle Road, Crossgate Moor, and this application is for the erection of 4 detached dwellings with attached garages, demolition of a stable block conservatory extension on Fernhill, and the erection of a carport covered area for parking of a horse box. So as previously mentioned, I'll go across to our officer, Barry Gavler. So Barry, if you can go ahead with your presentation, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. Can I just check that you can see that screen?
Well, I can say, Barry, can the members indicate by the thumbs up or some other visual?
It's there, Chairman. It's there. Thank you.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So we can all remain on mute, please, while Barry's speaking.
Okay, thank you, Chair. As you've just mentioned, this is a full planning application for the erection of 4 detached dwellings with attached garages, the demolition of an existing stable block, a conservatory extension onto the Fernhill property, and the erection of a carport covered area for a parking of a horse box. So this is the site location plan. The site is shown in red. Fernhill is in the centre of the picture. The lodge and the proposed access point are to the southeast, and the A167 Newcastle Road, you can see they're running from north to south. To the north is Club Lane, and the properties on White Smocks Avenue are just at the top of your picture there to the north of the site. So this is an aerial photograph of the site, zoomed in. You can see there are quite a number of mature trees and hedges surrounding the site. Most of these would be retained, although the cluster of conifers you can see just to the north of the picture would be removed and replaced by 3 of the dwellings. This is an aerial photograph zoomed out for a bit more context. You can see the University Hospital is just to the north of the picture, and the familiar site of County Hall is just to the east. To the south of the picture at the bottom of the screen, you can see Durham Johnson School there. So this is a site photograph on the A167 Newcastle Road. In the background you can see the lodge. The proposed access would take this route. The existing access, or the alternative access on Club Lane, that would be closed off, so this would be the primary and only access to the site. This is a picture of the existing access on Club Lane. As I've just mentioned, it's proposed to close that, and you can just see there some properties in the background. That is White Smocks Avenue. So this again is a photograph from the A167 Newcastle Road. You can just see Fern Hill in the background there, beyond the existing trees in the foreground. This is a photo of Fern Hill looking south. This is from the bottom of the site. This is a photograph from Fern Hill itself looking to the north. The conifers I mentioned, which would be to be removed, are in the foreground there, and you have White Smocks Avenue, existing properties in the background. This is a site photograph looking to the west. You can see the existing stable block there. These would be demolished and replaced by what would be plot number 4 on the site, out of a total of 4 properties that are proposed. So this is the proposed site plan. You can see there that you have 3 properties to the north towards White Smocks Avenue, and 1 property, plot 4, is to the west of the site, coming off a separate access, and you can see Fern Hill, the existing property, in the centre of your picture there. So these are the proposed elevations. This is house type 1, but they are typical of house types numbers 1, 2 and 3. They're split level properties, taking into account the topography of the site. These are the proposed floor plans of properties, typical of properties 1, 2 and 3. The 5-bedroom properties with garage in, the split level and set over 3 floors. This is a more traditional house type. This is house type number 4. It would be located, as mentioned earlier, to the west of the site and would replace the existing stable block. This is an illustration from Club Lane or White Smocks Avenue, which shows the rear of the 3 properties facing northward onto Club Lane. So this illustrates the extent of the green belt. I'll zoom out of this one in a moment, but you can see the green belt actually ends on White Smocks Avenue to the north. You can see some properties to the east of the site which are outside the green belt. This is a zoomed out view of the extent of the green belt. You can see White Smocks to the north, Durham Johnson School to the south of the site, and the hospital and county hall to the northeast. So onto the planning application itself. Consultee Responses. We've had no comments from Northumbrian Water. The Highways Authority have no objection, subject to the inclusion of some planning conditions relating to the upgrading of the access and a protected right-hand turn into the site. The Drainage Authority have no objections. The City of Durham Parish Council have noted that at the time of the inquiry into the County Durham plan, the inspector concluded that Fern Hill should remain in the green belt, and consequently it's their opinion that the time is now right to refuse the application, now there's certainty that the site would remain in the green belt. In terms of internal consultee responses, our policy team conclude that the proposal's likely to be inappropriate as it would reduce the openness of the green belt. The design and conservation team note that the design of the homes is of good quality and it would be a high quality development, and they have no objections. There's no objections from our nuisance action team. Our ecology officers have no objections, subject to a condition ensuring mitigation is carried out in the submitted ecology surveys. Archaeology officers have no objections, subject to further work being carried out. Our landscape officers comment that the proposals would broadly conserve the appearance of the area, but there is some harm, localised harm, on the designated area of high landscape value. External representations, the Coal Authority have no objections. The MP for the City of Durham has written in and notes that despite the willingness by the local authority to remove the site through the County Durham plan process, it is noted that the inspector chose not to agree and left Fernhill in the green belt. The MP goes on to request that all circumstances surrounding the application and land are considered when members reach a determination today. There have been 16 letters of support received from members of the public stating that the proposals would lead to much needed executive housing, and in turn that would contribute to the local economy. It is noted that supporters suggest that the site actually makes no contribution to the green belt. 9 letters of objection have been received. Various comments including the proposals would lead to a loss of privacy, light, an increase in traffic, harmful landscape impact, flood risk, that there has been a previous refusal, and that the site should remain in the green belt. So on to the main planning considerations, we're going to look at the principle of the development, the impact on the openness of the green belt, the design and layout, highways issues, and ecology issues. So in terms of the principle of development, the County Durham plan is the statutory development plan and the starting point for determining this planning application. As noted previously, the planning inspector's report into the County Durham plan confirmed that the site should remain in the Durham City green belt. The site is viewed as being located outside of the build-up area. Paragraph 143 of the NPPF states that inappropriate development is by definition harmful to the green belt and shouldn't be approved except in very special circumstances. Officers consider that the construction of 4 new residential dwellings is considered to be inappropriate development. The benefits identified by the applicant relating to the provision of executive housing and the resulting economic benefits aren't considered to constitute very special circumstances, and therefore officers consider the proposals contrary to policy 20 of the County Durham plan and part 13 of the NPPF. Other planning considerations are the design and layout. It is considered that the design of the homes would be acceptable and they are of high quality. The layout is appropriate and it would have minimal harm to Fernhill, the lodge, and the setting of the site from views off Club Lane. Separation distances to existing properties, particularly on White Smocks Avenue, could be achieved, and amenity standards for future residents would be acceptable. A large number of trees and shrubs around the site would be retained, and additional and appropriate landscaping would be introduced. So overall, in terms of design and layout, it is considered that the proposals are of high quality and in accordance with the County Durham plan and the Durham City Neighbourhood Plan. There are no highways objections. Officers confirm, as noted previously, that a safe access and egress from the site could be achieved, and the site would be subject to conditions to improve the access point. And as noted again previously, ecology officers have no objections. So in conclusion, officers consider that the development would be inappropriate, it's within the green belt, and therefore is harmful. Additional harm arises due to the impact on the openness of the green belt, and the benefits of the proposal are restricted to a modest boost of executive housing and the resulting economic benefits. The application and supporting information fails to demonstrate very special circumstances, which is required by adopted County Durham Plan Policy 20 and paragraph 145 of the MPPF. The contribution to housing supply is notably reduced now the council is able to demonstrate a housing land supply in excess of 5 years, so weight that could be afforded to this is limited. So in conclusion, it's contrary to both the County Durham Plan and the MPPF, and therefore is recommended for refusal. And just to give a final update, the refusal reason now includes reference to the area of high landscape value, and the reason for refusal can be read at the bottom of that slide. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks for that, Barry. Now, as normal, we will go over to the registered speakers at this point, and I note that they're already in attendance in the meeting and have been waiting and watching that presentation. So first, on the list of registered speakers, we have Mr. Roger Cornwell, who is speaking on behalf of Durham City Parish Council. So, Mr. Cornwell, would you like to give your presentation now, please?
Thank you, Chair. Can everyone hear me okay?
I can hear you okay, but a little bit muffled.
Okay, our best. Good morning, Happy New Year. I hope eventually I'll see you all in person. I'm here to support the officer's recommendation and to ask you to refuse this application. Now, Fernhill and the field next to it are in the green belt, and they've been there since 2004. They perform the essential role of connecting Flass Vale to the broader countryside beyond. Mr. Bracewell was aggrieved, as we can see, that Fernhill was included in the green belt. The County Council proposed in various drafts of the County Durham Plan that it should be removed. My parish council and others felt it should remain in the green belt. And we all made our case, either in writing or in person, to the inspector at the examination in public of the County Durham Plan, which was in October 2019. Mr. Bracewell's case was in writing and set out why he felt Fernhill should not be in the green belt. His arguments are essentially the same as those he advanced in favour of this planning application, and you can see them in paragraph 61 of the officer's report. They are based on paragraph 134 of the MPPF. All comments about the manner in which the land was included in the green belt back in 2004 were put to the inspector. The inspector was clued up on Ms. Bracewell's arguments. The inspector considered all of these arguments and decided that Fernhill should remain in the green belt. On the 28th of October 2019, he issued an action point to the council to prepare potential main modifications to the plan and changes to the policies map to reflect my finding that there are not exceptional circumstances to justify moving land at Fernhill and former Lumley Boys School from the greenbelt. Note the responsibilities on the council come up with the wording of the modification. They did so, and draft policy 21 was in the version being examined. Changed it to that policy deleted Fernhill from the greenbelt, but the council decided in a main modification to remove that policy, thereby leaving Fernhill in the greenbelt. After delay caused by COVID, the County Durham Plan was approved on the 21st of October last year by resolution of the full council, obviously including yourselves, and Fernhill remains in the Greenbelt. Now, anybody aggrieved by this had 6 weeks to challenge it in the High Court. I don't know if that's happened, but I'm hoping that the solicitor may be able to advise you whether there have been any challenges to the County Durham plan, specifically on this issue, of course. Now I'm now turning to the applicant's statement of case in the committee report. I haven't seen the document circulated by his legal advisors, so you'll have to bear that in mind. He refers to statements of common ground reached with county council officers. All of those have been superseded by the inspector's findings. The applicant says that the development will not impact on the 5 purposes of the Greenbelt, which is the key consideration in the determination of his application. That's his wording, but he's referred to a set of criteria as he used in plan making when you're drawing up the County Durham plan, not in determining planning applications. Proposals affecting the Greenbelt have to be assessed with paragraphs 143 to 147 of the MPPF. And these say, as I think your officer has already outlined, a local planning authority should regard the construction of new buildings as appropriate in the Greenbelt, and also that inappropriate development is by definition harmful to the Greenbelt and should not be approved except in very special circumstances. Paragraph 145 sets out a list of exceptions, and none of these has been put forward by the applicant, or possibly, of course, in the document I haven't seen, but your legal officers dealt with those. So I have looked at paragraph 145. I cannot see any further exceptions as applying to this case. The argument we suggest that the applicant putting forward amount to a rerunning of what was heard at the inquiry into the County Durham plan. And that plan, of course, was endorsed by full council. Just one final point. The planning portal has a letter from the MP, Mary Foy, which some people have taken as expressing support for this application. It doesn't. Throughout, there's things like, Mr. Bracewell informed me, and Mr. Bracewell indicated, and so on. What the letter does is to outline her constituents' case, but she does not say she supports it. The MP's letter ends, I very much hope that all of the circumstances surrounding this land can be considered when a determination is reached. The parish council endorses that view, endorses those sentiments, which in any case I would have thought go without saying. When you reach a determination on this case, there's really only one conclusion you can reach, which is to refuse his application, and I ask you to do so. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for your presentation, Mr. Cornwell. As always, it's a pleasure to hear the points that you put forward for the committee to consider. So now we'll move over to the ward councillor, Councillor Liz Brown, who's in attendance this morning. And Councillor Brown, if you would like to give your presentation to committee now, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, everybody. May I start by apologising for some repetition of points within this address. I am speaking to this application because my predecessor, Councillor Holland, quite rightly called this to committee 6 years ago. At the time, the status of the land was in dispute. In the intervening years, there has been an examination in public for the new County Durham plan. The applicant put his case to the inspector then, and it was found to be unsound. Inspector Fieldhouse therefore recommended that the policies map should be amended to retain Fernhill in the Greenbelt, as detailed in paragraph 72 of the committee report. The County Durham plan was approved in October 2020, and this gives the proposed application site Greenbelt status and therefore protection under policies 20 and 39, supported by NPPF Framework Part 13 and 15. The officer has recommended that this application be refused, and I would ask that the committee support his recommendation to protect the green belt, green spaces around Durham City. Thank you.
Thank you for those words, Councillor Brown. Yes, I understand what you say about the reputation, but it can't be helped, and you try and put your case forward. Now, Barry, at this point, would you like to come in with anything, or would you prefer to wait until we've heard the other speakers?
I'll wait till we've heard the other speakers, Chair.
Okay, thank you. So now we'll move across to the other two registered speakers. And in order of registration on my documentation, I've got Mr. Paul Bracewell, and then I have Mr. Joe Ridgeon. Mr. Bracewell is the applicant and Mr. Ridgeon is his agent. Now, those two gentlemen have 5 minutes between them, and I will move to Mr. Bracewell first, and it's up to yourselves how long you take. And as previously mentioned, Martin from the committee services will indicate when the time is coming to a close. So, Mr. Bracewell, if I can ask you to start your presentation now, please.
Thank you for letting me speak to you today. As set out in the committee report, I purchased the site in 1994, and I've been looking to develop the site since 2004. This application was submitted in 2014, with additional information being submitted as required, most recently updated ecology surveys. Working with the council officers from the outset, we employed notable architects Jane Derbyshire and David Kendall to design a scheme which makes use of the natural topography of the site. The committee report confirms that the design is acceptable and takes on board the site's level changes. All the technical issues, including highways, drainage, ecology, have been considered to be acceptable. In 2016 and 2019, the council entered into statements of common ground in which they confirmed that Fernhill did not perform any of the 5 greenbelt purposes. In the committee report, officers also agreed that the site should be considered as previous developed land. We have submitted to the committee council's opinion, which I hope you've had an opportunity to review, and the key consideration for the assessment of the proposed development before you today is the impact on openness. In the officer's assessment of openness, paragraph 81 of the report, no assessment of visual elements of openness has been made. The current lockdown means that members are unable to visit the site, but if they did, they would find that what the site looks like on plan is not how it looks in reality. The proposed dwellings would be entirely screened both by mature landscaping on the boundaries of the site and by Fernhill itself, which sits at the top of the site, with 3 of the proposed dwellings sitting tucked in behind the house and the 4th house located as a replacement for the existing stables. The development has been designed so that there's no impact on the openness, which is obvious when you're on site, as the planning officers will have seen when they walked the site last week. In terms of the wider greenbelt, the council has accepted the development of the site will not result in encroachment into the greenbelt. Development of this site will not impact on the function of the Durham greenbelt. We respectfully request that members approve the application, recognising the benefits of the development, especially the economic benefits and the need for more executive housing to support the council's aspiration for Durham City. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Mr. Bracewell, and we will move across now to Mr. Joe Ridgeon, who I believe is your agent. So, Mr. Ridgeon, if you would like to speak for the rest of the allotted time, please.
Thank you, Chair. There's just 2 points I want to make. Firstly, I need to highlight that this is a brownfield site in the Greenbelt. That hasn't been mentioned this morning. That is set out in the committee report, but that's a key consideration when members are assessing this site. The second thing, just picking up what Mr. Cornwall said, obviously looked at the principle, but members need to consider the scheme that's before them today. It's not a large volume house builder type scheme. It's 4 executive dwellings designed to be appropriate for the site. The proposed development takes consideration of the topography of the site to ensure that there's no impact on the visual openness of the site. There are very special circumstances which have been set out in the opinion that's been provided to members. and I think the key thing is that it's different on site. Officers have seen the site and they've been out visiting as well, and it's a shame that members can't visit the site to appreciate it themselves, because when you are on site, it's very much a different understanding of how the proposed houses will sit within the landscape, and in our view that there would not be any impact on openness of the green belt, and therefore it's acceptable under paragraph 145 part G of the NPPF. If there's any further questions, more than happy to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ridgeon. I will go across to Barry, and Barry, I don't know whether you're going to pick up this point, but I would like to just say something at this juncture about the emphasis that's been made on the fact that we aren't carrying out site visits. This planning committee is made up of a mix of members, and a planning committee always includes local members. And apart from it including local members, and that site's very close to County Hall, so I'm under no illusion that the councillors on this committee aren't aware of where that site is. It's a very prominent site, so if that just puts your mind at rest a bit, Mr. Ridgeon, that actually the planning committee will know where the site is, and some of our committee are very conscientious and will have done journeys past there, you know, in the past. So I'll move across to you now, Barry, to come back with any comments you would like to make.
Thank you, Chair. Just to confirm that officers do think that all the technical issues relating to the application are acceptable. However, we're looking at the principle of development, and officers do consider that it's inappropriate development in the Greenbelt. And very recently, it was deemed by the planning inspector of the County Durham Plan that the site should remain in the Greenbelt. And officers' opinion is that it would substantially alter the local area and the openness of the Greenbelt, and therefore that's why the application is recommended for refusal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Barry. I've got somebody's hand raised, and I'm not absolutely. Oh, Claire, it's yours. So, Claire, would you like to come in now?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to pick up on the points that were made about the impact on the openness of the green belt. Now, there are two main elements of openness, both spatial and visual. So the council's opinion that was submitted and Mr. Ridgeon both raised issues of visual element of openness. I thought it was quite interesting within the council's report that there wasn't any view offered in terms of spatial impact. Clearly, the impact of 4 dwellings in terms of spatial openness is going to be greater than what arises from the existing situation. We're going from a situation where there are kind of maybe one building to be demolished and replaced with 4 new dwellings. So clearly there is going to be quite a significant impact on spatial openness in terms of this proposed development. And I think that's really an inescapable conclusion which no amount of discussion on visual openness can reasonably alter. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. So, committee, it's now your turn to have your say, ask your questions, and to come to the conclusion. So I will now go across to the committee, and I will remind members, if possible, please, if whatever device you're using, if you could possibly type in RTS, and it will pop up on the chat function, and then we can keep tabs on you know, which councillors which would like to speak in which order. So it's over to you, committee. Councillor Davidson.
Thanks, Chair. Seen nobody else has typed RTS in, I thought I would have a first poke at this. On first looking at it, it would seem like it would be a good scheme because it would be something that we need in the county, which is we need those executive houses. I remember being on a planning committee a few years ago, just shaking his head, which is not nice. I remember being on the plan committee a few years ago where we had a scheme which was in Burnmoor, which was sort of a 50-50 scheme, and the reason why we accepted in the end was because it was bringing these executive houses into the county that we desperately needed. But the one problem I've got with this one is the one that everybody keeps mentioning, which is the fact that I don't know, obviously, all the history of it about how it was put in the green belt, how it wasn't put in the green belt. But if the inspector says that it should be in the green belt, I'm sort of struggling to see what we can do about it, really, because we've waited so long for a county turn plan, which we're holding our hats on to say this is our blueprint for the future. Then I'm struggling to see how we can say we've waited this long, we've now got the plan, and we're gonna disregard it, really. So that's me rambling way of saying that I'd really like the houses, but I'm not sure that in the green belt we can possibly do it. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Davidson. Councillor Ivan Jewell.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Ivan Jewell, County Councillor for Burnopfield and Dipton Division. Yes, I mean, I look at this application and I look at the development, and it looks good. The quality seems good. The types of housing seem good. And on that aspect of it, everything seems very, very good indeed, and very, very positive. However, where I struggle is that this falls within the green belt, and that is the reality of the situation. And the recommendations are that we refuse the application because it falls within the green belt. I will listen to what other people have got to say, but at the present time, although I like the development very much and it has very, very many things going for it, many pluses, it is difficult for us to accept the application due to the fact that it falls within the green belt. Thanks very much, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Jewell. And now I'll move over to Councillor Paul Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. Paul Taylor, representing the people of Brandon Division. What we have before us, Chair, is an application build on our green belt. We've heard a lot of history this morning and some good presentations, which I'm grateful for. But a lot of history was actually irrelevant, unfortunately. But thanks anyway. We are where we are. The application before us is to build in the green belt. That is the bottom line, to build in the green belt. We either agree with the inspector that it is correct to be in the green belt, and I do agree with the inspector. Of course, it will cause harm. It will cause harm to the green belt. It is inappropriate development. It is urban sprawl. I know the area very well, Mr. Ridgeon. Drive past it nearly every day. I can nearly see it from my house, and I value that area, and I want to keep it in the green belt. So therefore, I have to say I totally agree with our senior planning officer. He has it absolutely spot on as far as I can see. This is an inappropriate development. It always has been. It always will be, because it's in the green belt. And thank you for that, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Next up to speak, we have Councillor Bev Coult.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Bev Court, Eshenwick and Gilbert Ward. A couple of similar points to my colleagues, to be honest, Chair. The development does look superb, it looks exceptional quality, the properties look fantastic, but for me, similar to Councillor Taylor, the issue I would have is I cannot go against the officer's recommendation and the fact that the inspector has advised that that property must remain within the green belt. So for me, I'm sorry, as much as it does look a fantastic development, we cannot be building within that green belt land.
Thank you for that, Councillor Coult. Now, we do have several other members on the planning committee this morning, and does anybody else have anything that they'd like to add or any questions that they'd like to raise with our planning officers? I think that's Councillor Freeman.
Yes, hello. My name's David Freeman. I'm County Councillor for the Elvet and Gilesgate Division. Like my colleagues, unfortunately, I will have to accept the officer's recommendation that we refuse this application. It is in Greenbelt, and when we're looking to develop anything in Greenbelt, there really needs to be some sort of exceptional circumstance. I don't see any exceptional circumstance here. Other members have talked about the merits of this type of housing in County Durham. Neville's Cross does not lack for executive housing. There is no massive demand for executive housing in the Neville's Cross division. Perhaps if it was some other form of housing, that may make it slightly more acceptable. But I don't feel that this in any way is exceptional. And therefore, I think we do have to reject this application. It is inappropriate development within the Greenbelt. And yes, I mean, there is a long history to this development, and it appears that this county council wished to remove that site from the Greenbelt, but thankfully the inspector has thought otherwise. And this is not just an inspector's decision from years ago, this is an inspector's decision from only months ago. So it's a very current decision that's been made. So yes, I would support the officer's recommendation to refuse this application. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Freeman. I do have Councillor David Brown who's registered that he'd like to speak. So Councillor Brown, can you come in now, please?
Thank you, Chair. David Brown from Setchfield Division. I hear what all our colleagues say on the committee, but I would just like to ask the officer that what are these special circumstances, or could he give me some examples of special circumstances within the Greenbelt? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. So Barry, I'll take that over to you, and perhaps Claire might want to come in as well. So Barry, could you give some examples of what would be a special circumstance, please?
Thanks, Chair. I think in this particular instance, the applicants put forward that executive housing would be the special circumstance. The council's SHMA doesn't mention it. There's no evidence that there is actually a need for executive housing, and it's not even mentioned in the County Durham plan. I think what we would look at being exceptional circumstances is if there was a need for a particular type of housing in the area, such as affordable housing, etc. It's not proposed in this instance, and there's no evidence to suggest that executive housing is needed. So if I can ask Claire perhaps to come in at this point. Thanks, Chair.
Claire, if you could give some, I think perhaps it's just general examples of what would be considered.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, members. I mean, case law is quite clear that a very wide range of issues can be considered to be very special circumstances for the purpose of assessing Greenbelt proposals. However, just to give you a couple of examples of what we've done in County Durham recently, so there was the scheme up at Lambton, which was in the Greenbelt, which I think was about 400 homes. So to demonstrate the very special circumstance in those, in that application, we secured a significant scheme of public benefit in terms of public access to the grounds and other benefits and things like that. There was another scheme towards the Arneson Centre, which was in the Greenbelt. I can't remember the name of the site, but that was secured. Again, I think it was significant financial benefits. So it's something which has got to be kind of over and above. It's got to be very special, basically. And officers have carefully considered, in this instance, the benefits afforded to the executive housing and the boost to supply and things like that. And I think they've just concluded that in this case, there isn't anything that we could put forward as justification as being very special circumstances. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. So I sometimes put things in layman's terms. So for my mind, what I guess you're saying there is that it would have to be put forward with some evidence behind whatever the special circumstance was. There would have to be an evidence base behind it to prove that that was actually a special circumstance and that was something that could be put forward.
Yeah, I mean, it's a judgment call for members, really. So I don't think it could be criticised if you thought that what was being proposed did amount to very special circumstances. In the judgment of officers, we don't think that the acknowledged harm by reason of the inappropriateness of the proposed development is outweighed by the provision of 4 homes in the Greenbelt and the harm that would result from that.
Yeah, thank you. Does that answer your questions, Councillor Brown?
It does indeed. Thank you very much.
Right. Thank you for raising that. So would anybody else on the committee like to raise a point, offer a question? Is anybody mindful at this moment to come forward with a motion? Councillor Paul Taylor.
Yes, Chair, I'd like to move refusal and agreement with the officer's recommendation on this inappropriate planning application to build on the Greenbelt. I did listen and listened quite closely to hear those very special circumstances, but there were none. So therefore, I do move refuse the application. Thank you.
Right. And Councillor Freeman, you would like to speak?
Yes, I will second Councillor Taylor's motion to refuse. Well, to refuse application and go with the officer's recommendation. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Is there anybody else, before we move to this vote, is anybody else on the committee who would like to speak or who has an alternative motion to put forward? No, I'm not seeing any indications there, so I think we will need to move across to the vote. And Claire, if you could explain how the vote will take place, please, for those people who haven't been present at previous meetings.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so we'll be taking a vote on the refusal application as set out within the officer's report with the updated reasons for refusal. It's been proposed by Councillor Taylor and seconded by Councillor Freeman. What I'll do is I'll go through members in alphabetical order who are present at the meeting, starting with Councillor Blakey. Could I just ask if you are for or against the proposal to refuse, please?
I'll go for refuse.
Thank you. Councillor David Brown.
I go for refusal.
Refusal. Thank you. Councillor Corrigan.
For refusal.
Thank you. Councillor Court.
For refusal.
Thank you. Councillor Davidson.
Agree with the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Freeman.
For refusal.
Thank you. Now, I don't think Councillor Gardner or Hawley are present, so I'll go move to Councillor Iverson.
Refusal.
Thank you. Councillor Jewell.
Refusal.
Thank you. Councillor Manchester.
For the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Pounder.
For refusal.
Thank you. Councillor Shuttleworth.
Refusal.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor.
I agree the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Clark, Chair, unless you wish to vote, that's unanimous in favour of refusal.
Yes, I don't think it's necessary for me to, but actually I would have voted to support the officer's recommendation too. So thank you for that, Claire. So committee, in the matter of this application that we have before us this morning, the committee vote to concur with the officer's recommendation and to vote for refusal of this application. So thank you very much everybody for your attendance. Before we wind the meeting up, do any committee members have anything to say, even if it's just Happy New Year to each other? No. I don't have anything else on the agenda. There haven't been any other issues brought to my attention that needed to be spoken about this morning. So with that, I will bring the meeting to a close. Thank you very much for your attendance and for the very valuable contributions that councillors have made this morning. And we will need to wait until we get the nod from the IT experts that we can stop recording. So if I can just ask councillors to continue to be part of the meeting until then. Thank you very much.